Hello, welcome back to my channel, and today is another part of the following Victorian traditions for a year. Today is a tradition that I have seriously been looking forward to, and that is the Victorian Midsummer's Night. This is what Shakespeare's A Midsummer Night's Dream was based off of. I have here my book of Mrs. Sharp's traditions, as usual, and I'll read to you a little bit of the tradition behind the Midsummer Night. The celebration of Midsummer Night is a magical adventure of imagination and whimsy young children can embark upon. This ancient festival celebrates the summer solstice, and while it's barely noticed in America, it is still celebrated in England and Europe. It is observed either on June 21st, the longest day of the year, or June 24th, the official Midsummer Day, which is also the feast of St. John the Baptist. If you want to introduce this delightful summer custom into your family's repertoire of pastimes, begin by telling your children that legend says that on Midsummer Night, the fairy realm holds its annual revels and is visible to human eyes if you're lucky enough to notice. As the book describes, the tradition is based on the idea that this is the time of year, the specific day, when the fairies hold their festivals and come out for humans to see if you're lucky enough to notice. It says here, and the fairies expect a party, of course. Everyone knows fairies are perfectly capable of providing their own refreshments. However, Mrs. Sharp discovered a secret long ago which she passed down to her children. Any human child who prepares a feast for the fairies on Midsummer Night will be well rewarded. So this description is very nice and long, but basically the main idea is that if a child has a small party, throws a small party for the fairies, then the fairies will reward the child. Of course, I'm 16 and not a small child, but I will still be setting up a little fairy party / feast just to honor the tradition, but there aren't going to be any of the sort of gifts that the fairies leave behind. Usually, of course, the parents would provide a small gift for their children if they see that their child has set up a little fairy party. So the plan for tonight is to have a little celebration around dinner time where we'll set up a little fire. We're going to be using a propane fire pit because currently we're not allowed to have fires in my area anymore, and we'll be roasting hot dogs, maybe roast some vegetables, and I'll set up a little fairy feast, and I'll see if I can find any of the oldest music possible, some late Victorian music that I can play on my radio. I have this little tiny tea set. Isn't that adorable? It's so cute. Also, at the thrift store the other day, I picked up these little tiny garden tools for only a few cents. Look at how freaking cute these are. So the first thing I'm going to do is start getting ready for the little fairy party that I'm going to set up, and I'm going to try and maybe make some sort of doll-sized or fairy-sized table that I can put the tea set on. Then later I'll see what kinds of little tiny foods I can scrounge up, like little bits of fruit and things. So let's go and find some fairy party supplies. I got this little basket to keep everything that I found together, and then I started looking through some buttons to see which ones I thought would be suitable as little tiny fairy dishes. Then I went to pick some flowers and I made a friend. There's your kitty cat. Hello. Meow. Then I actually sewed the flowers together to make a garland, and I don't know how I never thought of this before, but it's actually very effective. I ended up ditching the buttercups because they were just way too fragile to actually thread together. So this is where I'll be setting up the little fairy party, and my little garden from Arbor Day is over there. And then we'll put the party right here. So I have a basket of lovely little things, including the tea set and the garden tools, but I found some other things like some dried flowers that I have, and some thread spools that can sort of act as chairs for the fairies to sit on. So yeah, I'm just gonna start setting this up. Once most of the fairy party was set up, I picked some ivy and started a very unusual little sewing project. I found this weird sort of T-shaped stick, and I thought it would be great to make a little fairy-sized umbrella just in case it rains. After using thread to tie together some sticks and making this weird umbrella frame thing, I used some really big ivy leaves and actually sewed them together to make like the actual sheltering part of the umbrella. And it may be for only Then moving on to a little bit of fairy food, I made a batch of pancakes, some for me, and plenty for the fairies. I played around with the amount of liquid that I put into the batter to see what different sizes and textures I could make the pancakes be. Alrighty, so I made a couple pancakes, and I made some fairy-sized treats. I've got them right here. I made quite a few of them, and then I went through them and picked which ones I liked the best. First, I made more of like a little cake-ish looking one. Then for a couple of these, I actually kind of tried to fry them in the shape of donuts, so I can try putting some powdered sugar on them. I've also got this little cherry from our cherry tree, and I think I'm gonna slice it into little wedges and put it on one of the plates. So I'm gonna do that, and then I'm going to make a little bit of tea that I can put in the teacups out there. So I'm gonna go make some tea, and then we can start putting things out in the garden. Then I went and did some finishing touches to my miniature foods. I put some powdered sugar onto the donuts, and I made a little tiny batch of lemon glaze by adding a few drops of lemon juice to some powdered sugar, and I put that onto one of the cakes. Also here you can see my little cherry slices. Looks like a mini tangerine. So now that we have the basis of the fairy party set up, and I have some foods for the fairies, some little itsy bitsy tiny foods, and my parents will be joining me, and we'll sit out and light a fire, and it'll be lovely. So I need to put on my fairyish clothing. This little bunch is mine. Keep your heads down, boys, and sing. Hey! Bag up your troubles in your old kit bag and smile, smile. Here's my fairy outfit. I really like it. I've worn this dress quite a lot whenever I want to feel sort of ethereal. It has sort of asymmetrical kind of jagged hem, which I like. Then I have this little ivy crown that I made a while ago by just using wire to kind of tie together some ivy, and then I let it dry like that. And I have my favorite little moonstone necklace because I think it just looks so very magical. So I'm just gonna go put out the fairy food, and then we can begin our night of midsummer fantasy.
I'm so sad to think that I have had to turn you from your home so coolly. I'd be gaining nothing by remaining. What would Mrs. Grundy say? Her conventions, kindly recollect to them. We must please respect to them duly.
And then we had a fire and condiments and my family members, and I made myself a hot dog and it was delicious, and then we just kind of chilled and it was nice.
Oh, say, let us fly, dear. Where, kid? To the sky, dear.
Now, also on this day, I made custard, and I've never had custard before, so I always wanted to try it. So here we were, but I was kind of freaked out by the amount of eggs that was in here, so this is how it went.
I like eggs.
I don't know, it's kind of weird.
I did, however, then proceed to eat the entire custard, and I discovered in this process that with strawberries, it is quite exceptional. Then I realized that I had not brought out my radio, so I brought it out and put on some Edwardian music. It was quite nice. Also, this song that was playing was called Boiled Beef and Carrots, but is it just me, or does it sound like he's saying boiled beef and Karens?
Boiled beef and carrots, boiled beef and carrots.
Then I started roasting myself another hot dog, and my mom came along and started roasting water buffalo on a stick, so here's that.
Look at this. Look at her. Look at this.
Then we sent a video to my brother to make him feel bad that he wasn't here.
Look what you're missing. Look what I'm roasting. We're having a little bit of a party.
Then it was a really pretty night, so we decided to go for a walk and watch the twilight to celebrate the summer solstice. And that concluded our Midsummer Night celebration.
She goes, balance yourself like a bird on a beam in the air.
It is now the next day. As far as Victorian traditions go, this was one of the ones I was most excited to try, and I'm probably going to do it every year now because I really enjoyed it. Aside from the fact that it was super nice to be able to just have a fire and roast some things with my parents, which was just super cozy and everything. Also, just the history behind it is really interesting to me, and hearing about the different fairy legends, and there's so much to look into just within that. Doing some research about what the Victorians believed about fairies and all that stuff, I think that that would be super interesting. But also putting together a little sort of fairy party, fairy garden situation was so fun, and it just made me feel like I was 8 again and I had the time of my life. This was also a really fun time to try out a new recipe because I'd never had custard before, so that was a fun little thing to try. So at the end of the day, do I think that this is a good tradition? Do I think that you should try it? Absolutely. I think this tradition is brilliant. It's super cozy and whimsical, and it gives you an opportunity to dress up a little fairy-ish if you feel like it. Also, if you wanted to do a little bit more planning for it, make it a little more elaborate, you could invite people over, have some more different refreshments going on. And also, this tradition was intended for younger children. I am 16, so doing this with some little kids would be super fun. If you have small kids, I highly recommend doing this, or even just making a fairy garden in general, just because it's a lot of fun. So that concludes this Victorian tradition, and I'm really glad that I tried it. I totally think that you should try it too. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please comment, rate, subscribe, and all that jazz, and I'll see you next time. Bye! This is actually orange juice because I was too lazy to make tea.
Rude car.